So people have really strong feelings about how you're supposed to talk. And this is a dialect. Everyone has a dialect, or sometimes people call it an accent. Sometimes people say, oh, I don't have an accent, or you don't have an accent. But of course, by virtue of pronouncing sounds in a certain way, means that you have some type of accent. A dialect also means that two language variants are mutually intelligible. And dialects can be differentiated by pronunciation and vocabulary as well as grammar. So, in some cases, language dialects get so far apart that they actually branch off and become two different languages. So the rule of thumb is that if you can't understand 20% of what a person is saying, then you're speaking two different languages. So in Trainspotting, the Scottish movie Trainspotting, the first introductory section of that movie had to be redubbed because no one could understand what the actor was saying, at least for American audiences. So we know that there are standard dialects that are used by newscasters mainly, and this is just an accepted way of pronouncing words, and not in any sense, in any real sense, the right way of pronouncing words. It's an arbitrary designation about how you're supposed to talk. And of course, some dialects are prestige dialects, right, like standard dialects or newscasters, or William F. Buckley, or Kelsey Grammer, while others are stigmatized, and these are called stigma dialects. So there's regional dialects. These vary by geography. There's Socio X. These vary by social group, like maybe hip-hop artists or valley girls. And there's also dialects, and these are just how you talk individually. Again, people have been long concerned with how you're supposed to talk, right? This is the rain in Spain fell mainly on the plain kind of thing, especially in acting. And Edith Skinner is known for teaching actors to speak what she called good American speech. And if you watch old movies or if you've heard Kelsey Grammer speak, that's what's called the mid-Atlantic accent, and it's sort of a blend between a British accent and an American accent. So AAVE, or African American Vernacular English, sometimes called Ebonics, is an example of a stigmatized or a stigma dialect. And in this case, some of the grammatical constructions are different from standard American English. It's not that it's actually agrammatical or just chaotic, it's just different from standard English. There's also different sounds. So there's a limited use of the R or R sound after a vowel, as in car, right? And this is very similar for Southern dialects and other dialects of English. And this leads us to prescriptive and descriptive grammars. You're probably really familiar with prescriptive grammars. This has a long history of people trying to assert the correct grammar. So instead of I don't have none, you have to say I don't have any. Or you was wrong should be you were wrong. Matilda is fatter than me should be Matilda is fatter than I, according to these prescriptive rules. So they're prescribing how you're supposed to speak. Many of the rules that were laid out early on were actually based on Latin grammar, Latin being the ultimate model of the ideal language. And so we're left with rules like you can't split an infinitive. So an infinitive is like to go, to dance, to drink. So to boldly go actually splits the infinitive by adding a word in between to and go. And again, this is based on the Latin model, where you are unable to split an infinitive, like ear. So Spanish is a Latin language. You can't split ear, right, to go for us. And so people are becoming more and more annoyed with these arbitrary rules. And people like Steven Pinker, who we talked about before, he's got a new book about how these rules are ridiculous, and sometimes these rules get in the way of actually conveying your message. In contrast to prescriptive grammars, there are also descriptive grammars. These aren't so interested in prescribing the rules of spoken language, but rather documenting variation in spoken languages. So descriptive linguistics really takes the approach that language just is what it is, and it's not really hell-bent on moralizing about proper speech, but rather wants to understand why people use the constructions that they do, why people use the sounds that they do, and the words that they use. So I want to briefly tell you about a really interesting dialect that comes from the Chicago, Buffalo, Detroit, Rochester area, and a shift in vowels that's known as the Northern Cities Vowel Shift. So I'm going to play you some sounds and think about some words, and think about what words you hear.
Flag, sax, desk, bosses, pad.
Let's listen to those again.
Flag, sax, desk, bosses, pad.
So here are those same words in a sentence.
Old senior citizens living on one block. You had to wear sacks, no sandals. So I like that, sitting behind the desk.
Something like dusk is actually desk, and
I can remember vaguely when we had the bosses with the antennas on the top.
bosses is buses. And finally, had is actually head.
Shook her head. Shook her head.
So that's the Northern Cities vowel shift. And I know this looks crazy, but this is how it works. So when one vowel sound changes and replaces another vowel sound, then that vowel sound has to shift as well. And so you get this circular shift in vowels, going from eh as in desk to as in dusk.
Desk.
And then the sound, as in buses, we would say buses, shifts to the
Bosses.
sound, right? And then the sound shifts to
Flag.
the sound. The sound also shifts to the sound,
Pad.
as in, instead of saying head,
Pad.
she says had. And then the sound, because it's been replaced, shifts to something totally different,
Mat.
which is really a diphthong, mat. Instead of just it's mat. And it's kind of funny, this distinction that we make between languages. In some cases, two languages are recognized as being two different languages only because there's a political division between them. They're perfectly intelligible. So really, technically they should be dialects. But as Max Weidenreich said, a language is a dialect with an army and a navy.